Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Military Monday Show with Mike Guardia, award-winning author and historian. Hey, everybody, welcome. It is the 4th of July week. It is the 1st of July. Can you believe it? I thought it was winter just a couple minutes ago, and now it is definitely summer. We love our Military Monday show with Mike Guardia, and today he's going to give us a little insight on American history. We're going to talk about the American flag. Yes, the red, white, and blue. Why? And we're going to talk about the American anthem and what about that word patriot, which has become a little bit political now. So welcome back, Mike. How are you?
Hey, Lisa, I'm doing great. Always a pleasure to be on the show.
Hey, now, the History Channel, give us an update. What's going on?
Yes, ma'am.
Where can people see you?
All right. Yeah. So this is my second time on the History Channel, and the current series that is out is season 1 of The Proof is Out There, Military Mysteries. And season 1 just wrapped. We had 6 episodes in season 1. I was in 5 of those 6 episodes. Nice. And what this show does is it capitalizes on the format of the original Proof is Out There. So I think in a general sense, the History Channel is making Proof is Out There kind of analogous to the old CSI TV series, where, you have CSI Las Vegas and CSI Miami. So, whereas Proof was Out There, was dealing with mostly, tales of the supernatural and extraterrestrials, Proof is Out There, Military Mysteries is, focusing on the unresolved military mysteries of the past, things that, can't quite be explained, and just, uncanny happenstances that, can't normally be addressed through everyday scientific inquiry and analysis. And one of the broader themes that we've tried to keep throughout the episode is that you have these things that have been unusual circumstances and strange phenomena that have happened within the context of military operations, and you try to find the explanation for it. And the best thing that you can come up with a lot of times is just a very plausible theory, but nobody's ever really quite sure. At any rate, I had a tremendous amount of fun filming this series, and any of your listeners out there can find it either on Amazon Prime. It's also on streaming.
Cool.
Xfinity On Demand, pretty much any streaming service, to include.
Nancy, I'm going to watch Mike tonight. Yes, that is so cool. Because it used to be that you could only get on the History Channel, and now they've expanded.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, cool. So that's interesting. You talk about the unexplained, right? Like there's those weird mysteries. Like, I just did an interview with Clay Schwab, who is the great grandson of Manny Schwab, who actually had the biggest whiskey distillery in Tennessee before Jack Daniels. And he was this massive entrepreneur, not written about. Kind of like you writing about the stories that need to get out there of people.
Mm-hmm.
The day he died, the distillery burned to the ground.
No kidding. Wow.
Pure accident. Like what? Like there's no proof of, or anything other than it was a wildfire nearby. And that's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
It had nothing to do with any kind of shenanigans, but that's weird. Like Thomas Jefferson and John Adams dying on the 4th of July. Don't you think that's weird? Like getting into our American history for the 4th of July. I still think that's weird. Don't you think that's weird?
Of course.
That they died that?
Yeah, and that they both died on the same day. They both died on July 4th. And it's almost a touch of divine irony, because both Jefferson and Adams, they hated each other.
I know. It's like you're going to have to keep dueling it out when you get to where you get.
Yeah.
Like, do you think they're still fighting it now? And then it's kind of like Hamilton. Like, these people are going to still fight. I mean, what's going to happen after the two people we're supposed to look at voting for when they pass on. Are they going to fight up there or down there or wherever they go? They're going to fight it out still. It's interesting about that energy, right? But it's unexplained yet.
Mhm.
But I want to ask about this, about the unexplained mysteries and things like that, that kind of thing where I was talking about this with a writer who had, he's an outdoorsman and he had he traversed with his friend Pete McBride, who's a National Geographic photographer. The two of them hiked the entire Grand Canyon, right across it. No one's done it
Mm.
other than Native Americans in, history context.
Yeah.
And, this was a National Geographic thing to really, document species and cultural sites and climate change and all this stuff. And I said to him, well, did you feel like other things when you were there once you got past the touristy stuff of the Grand Canyon? Because there is touristy stuff. There's a lot of noise pollution with helicopters and stuff
Right.
like that. Like, did you feel like we have this other energy? And we were talking about that. And he was talking about some of the Native Americans he met on the trail. And I mean, it's interesting. So do you think when you go into combat that there's this extra sense that we tap into? I know I'm getting woo woo, but I am. I mean, we're supposed to talk about the flag and everything, but the woo woo factor, I believe, actually exists and it's not been documented as such, maybe, but it's about like true awareness, right? Do you think that happens in combat or going out there, even if you don't end up in combat, your senses are so heightened and aware that you're in another sense that we beyond the five senses?
I do. And I think a lot of it is attributable to the sustained rush of adrenaline and how just really the presence of that amplifies the senses. And, you've probably heard any number of stories about, when people get a big surge of adrenaline that they, achieve almost superhuman feats of strength, like, parents who have a child who might be trapped under a car and, they dig down deep and with that rush of adrenaline, they're able to lift the car off of the person. Um,
But not
you
the
know,
next day. No way. It's not
right.
going to happen at all.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So, that I think is always present in any high tense situation like that. And, another thing that I commented on in one of my previous works, and, there were a lot of interviewees whom I spoke to who have confirmed this, particularly the pilots that I interviewed when I was writing Skybreak. They say that, you not only have that heightened sense of awareness, but for them, in their particular instance, what they commented on was the presence of time dilation. They said that, everything, and it probably in no small part of function of the adrenaline, but I also think there's an otherworldly aspect to it, is that when you're in those intense situations, time does in fact seem to slow down.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times it seems like things are moving in slow motion, and you, in the ambient sound of whatever is happening all around you also dims. It's like somebody turns the volume on a stereo down really low for just a few seconds, and then they crank it back up. That is another phenomenon that is out
Mm.
there. But
What,
yeah.
what about people jumping out of their bodies and seeing this situation and seeing themselves in the situation? Have you heard of that?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I've heard of that quite a bit. It's
Wow.
yeah, it's where the supernatural really does take hold of you in some form or fashion, and in a roundabout way that actually reminds me of something. I can't remember if I talked about this in an earlier episode or not, but uh, it, tales of the supernatural and encounters with the supernatural, most frequently, and I don't think this gets told enough, but most frequently, the people who share encounters with ghosts or, just these supernatural
Hmm.
experiences, most of the stories actually come from cops and firefighters.
Mm.
And they're remarkably consistent with how they tell it. And if you think about it, to me, it makes sense because I'm thinking, okay, well, your cops, your EMTs, anyone who you can call a first responder, they're very close to the epicenter of an event where there is a lot of intensity and
Energy.
a lot of energy and also a lot of death, destruction. There's always a morbid element to it. And being that you have that meta energy there, there's bound to be some encounters with the spiritual aspect as well. I mean, I just think of a lot of the stories that I've heard of, cops encountering ghosts or, cops having these weird premonitions or, firefighters having an out of body experience. Well, yeah, it makes sense because of the nature of the job. When you take the spiritual plus the adrenaline, you're going to have that woo woo factor, as you called it. Huh?
Yeah. I don't mean to put it down, but it's because, people will go, oh, what, you're getting wonky and woo woo, but things happen. And I think there's just this other element we don't know. We haven't quite, I think the adrenaline is right. I mean, Nancy was in a car accident, when we first got to this country within like months. And this elder gentleman was on new blood pressure pills and he passed out at the wheel, hit
Oh,
his head, and Nancy was at a stop. She couldn't move. She was at a stop sign and he just went into her, the airbag, everything broke her sternum. She was a bit of a mess, but fine. But it was a lot of healing because her ribs were broken, all of that. But they put her in an ambulance and she went to the top of the ambulance and looked down at herself. And she was like, and then when the guy came out, they put him in the same ambulance and he was like, how's that girl or whatever it was that I hit, whatever it was. And she got so mad at how he said it that she came back down off the ceiling and said like, hey, I'm here. you know, so isn't that weird how that happens? And I always think that in military situations, it's almost like how to also overcome fear is to be on the outside. So we
right.
have these extra powers maybe because if you can see yourself from the outside in, right? You can
Mhm.
actually see yourself there. That's odd. You then are seeing from a different perspective that our eyes are not there. So I wonder about that in battle of being able to see things from different perspectives that, and I wonder about that when we look at people watch all those shows. Oh, I don't watch them all because we can't keep up with anything as we travel, but like all these, you know, the pagans fighting this and that, um, all of the ancient wars, right? The Saxons and all of that kind of thing. But there's always that, like Merlin. Merlin's got that, right? Where it's like this nature side and yet it's bloody hell and murder, but they have this extra spiritual side. I wonder if that was always there as kind of a coping mechanism as well. And maybe when you're seeing things from the outside looking in, it could just be your own mind. Like, how do you know if it's real? Like, how much of it is illusion and real? Now that got trippy, didn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know, Mike. Yeah, but I think when we're in those situations, it's like it's life or death. So your body goes through all kinds of things, you know?
Mhm.
Wow. Whew. Okay. Are you ready to talk about the American flag?
Yes,
It's
ma'am.
4th of July coming up. It's 4th of
Hmm.
July week. So this is going to be everyone on our Big Blend Radio, a Military Monday podcast channel with Mike, and then also in our Big Daily Blend show because we like to celebrate holidays. But the American flag, I wanted to bring this up. Okay. I think pretty much everything we're going to talk about it has some political controversy to it
Sure.
because the flag has been a point of controversy, right, in sports and people saying, hey, I don't want to raise the flag if our country isn't going how I feel.
Hmm.
Um, so let's just start with when did the flag come into existence and didn't have many changes. It had changes as we went from territories to states, right?
It
But how
did.
did it get the red, white, and blue? I mean, is
Okay.
that a derivative off of England?
In a sense, it is. Yeah. So if we go all the way back to the early colonial times, what we have, as I can say, the basic idea behind the flag, was a derivative of a derivative of the flag of the East India Company, and
Hmm.
that was a British. I think you could probably call that the first conglomerate in the history of business. But
So
the
is
East
that like
India,
the Dutch East India Company that went to South Africa, or is separate? Or was it
so
East India first?
this is actually the British East India
Oh,
Company. Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah. So that flag was introduced in that flag was introduced in 1707 as an ensign, and it was flown at sea throughout the Indian Ocean. And what that East India Company flag was you basically took the Union Jack as it existed as the time, and you put it in the upper left-hand corner of that rectangular flag. And the rest of the flag were the red and white stripes, which would eventually be associated with our own stars and stripes. So that was the early inspiration for the flag. We can see where we can see where the genesis of that design came from. Now, of
Mhm.
course, by 1707, not only did the British have the East India Company, but they were also very heavily populating the North American continent. So we had a few different iterations of, some local or colonial flags, but still, by and large, we were flying the Union Jack here in what were the original 13 colonies. But you fast forward past the French and Indian War, and as things are hitting critical mass for us to start the American Revolution, what the Continental Congress did was adopt a flag that was very similar to that East India flag that I just mentioned, except they shortened the dimensions and they made the stripes, both the red and the white stripes, a bit wider,
Mhm.
and they narrowed the Union Jack to where it almost looked like it had been inverted about 90 degrees to its right. So that was the Grand Union flag. That was the flag that was used throughout most of the colonies. Those became known as the Continental Colors that were used between 1775 and 1777.
Okay.
So June 14th, 1777, June 14th, of course, what we now know as Flag Day. June 14th basically just took the same basic design of the stripe portion, the red and white stripes. And in the blue field, that's when Betsy Ross came in and said, okay,
Hmm.
well, for the 13 colonies that are in rebellion against Great Britain, a circular star pattern, which of course, each star is going to represent each one of the 13 colonies. And of course, that set the basis for what would become our national flag. And then, as time went on, as we added more states and we added more territories, the flag grew, and we added more stars to denote the number of states. So you have that 13 star circular Betsy Ross variant. But there was also another interpretation of the flag that was used at around the same time. A lot of
Hmm.
people, I think, we know Betsy Ross really as the mother of the flag, so to speak. But I think less attention gets paid to the variant that Francis Hopkins also had, which was the same red and white stripes, but in the blue field, instead of it being a circular pattern of stars, you had these six-pointed stars that were arranged in five different rows, and you had alternating rows of 3 and 2 stars to make up 18. And there was a slight variation of it that was used as the naval ensign for our ships at sea. And then, of course, when we added more states in 1795, it went from the original 13 to 15
Hmm.
to reflect both Kentucky and Vermont entering the Union as states. We had a 15 star, 15 striped flag. Okay. And and
Hmm.
that stayed consistent until, of course, we got more states. And what happened over time was that whenever a state was added, there would be a new design and there would be a new arrangement of stars. Each star, of course, representing a new state that had been added, but we didn't make that exception for
Hmm.
any territories. So let's see, as we went forward, of course, we had the Betsy Ross one, and then very briefly we had, as we added more states, going into the 1800s, we had an American flag that had the
Hmm.
stars arranged in the shape of a star.
Right.
hmm And then, of course, as time went on, you had the divergence where you had the Confederate States try to break away, and then they had the stars and bars. And oddly enough, the stars and bars that we associate with the Confederate flag today never actually existed in the form that's represented as. If we take the orange flag with the blue X and all of the white stars that are lining each part of that blue X, what that was actually the Confederate naval jack, and it
Oh.
used a slightly different color scheme. But after the war ended, that really became the symbolic battle flag of the Confederacy. The national flag of the Confederacy, at least for the first 2 to 3 years of the war, looked very similar to the old style Betsy Ross flag. And, I think on a subconscious level, that's what the Confederate founding fathers wanted, because if we look back through history, the all of the Confederates, when they seceded, they didn't want to call Jefferson Davis the father of the Confederacy. They said, no, 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 George
Oh.
Washington is the father of the Confederacy. We're just
Oh.
carrying on the revolutionary traditions that the founding fathers of America started. These Yankees up north, they're doing their own thing. So you had the Union and the Confederacy both thinking that they were the legitimate representation and the legitimate heirs to all of the founding fathers' revolutionary ideals.
Wow.
Yeah.
So,
But
but
of course,
okay, so yeah, but nowadays, like when you drive around, you'll see the Confederate flag now, and then people are going, oh, if they're waving a Confederate flag, that it's like it's so complicated now if someone has that. So I don't
it
know what
is.
to say to that. I mean, people are like, oh, if they have this, when we were in Gettysburg, the Confederate flag was there, and we were at the bed and breakfast owner, and I said, well, it's Confederate flag, and doesn't it mean this? And they're like, no, like, hello, we've got to remember about the Civil War and what not everybody was fighting about slavery. Some people were just fighting to protect their land. And so, I mean, it's complicated, right? So we
It
should just,
is.
it is, right? So this
Yeah.
Confederate flag, I mean, has it changed over from when you were talking about to now? With the red and white. It's red and white now, right? Am I right? Yeah. Red and
Right.
white.
Yeah. Well, I guess you could call, to me, it's always looked orange, but
Yeah, it is like an orangey red. It's like a brick
yeah,
red kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I'm with you
I
on that.
mean, yeah, no, I know that, I know that when people see the Confederate flag, they have feelings of, they have feelings of both rebellion and racism. And I don't think that they're necessarily wrong for thinking that,
Mm.
because it was written into the Confederate Constitution that one of the basis of their means for secession was they wanted to maintain slavery. And not only is
Uh,
this in the
there you
Confederate
go.
Constitution, but in each one of the state constitutions that made up the Confederacy, they're like, hey, we're doing this because we recognize the legitimacy of slavery as an institution and the superiority
Ooh.
of the white race over the African race.
So
So,
we're still fighting
yeah,
then, basically.
yeah. So it now,
Ah,
I think if more people knew that, they would be less inclined to try to display the Confederate flag. And I don't think that
huh.
people are wrong for thinking that. It's just when I come to it with my millennial perspective, I have to be sensitive to that because whenever I see the Confederate flag, honestly, Lisa, the only thing I think of it is the Dukes of Hazzard.
Dude, but you're not a millennial. You can't be a millennial. Are you a millennial?
I
Really?
am. Yeah.
Oh,
If
then
you
what
were
am
born in the
I?
early
I,
80s, then yeah.
oh, yeah, I'm ancient. I'm in the mid 70s. But yeah, well, you go millennial boy. I'm just gonna, you're like, yeah, no, but when you know, the Dukes of Hazzard, now don't stop me because of the cars that I see in Georgia, especially. Georgia has the Dukes of Hazzard cars like nobody else has. But anyway, that's all. We'll not go down that road. But,
I mean, all I think of is
it's,
the General Lee and the
yeah.
Balladeer coming over with his voiceover saying, "Oh no, them Duke boys is in trouble now."
Well, but when we travel the country, you see them displayed, and then their office a lot of times displayed with a political stance too.
Yeah,
And so it becomes this thing. And there's a lot of, you know, people we've interviewed over the years over Civil War, and some people are like this and that, and Lincoln it wasn't just about slavery, it was this too and that. So it's very complex what happened with the Civil War.
right.
Um, but the flag is now the way the flag is.
Hmm.
Are we the United States of America? But what's interesting to me, you're talking about the territories because, I look at Puerto Rico and I'm like, that is such a weird situation.
Yeah,
I want to give them a star on there, but like it's odd, like that they're part of our country, but they're not allowed to vote. But it's and America Samoa, like
hmm,
half want to be part of it, and like they're fighting amongst themselves whether they want to be part of it. And I'm going, have you seen the problems we have? Maybe you don't. I I don't know. It's like it's kind of interesting with the territories. So they don't get to be represented on the flag until you become a state.
right.
Um, but it's an interesting thing what goes on with having a territory too. And I think we forget that. And it's interesting that Hawaii is not a territory, and how that happened. And I think that had to do with Dole and the money, right? In a way, swooping in and taking that Hawaii. Okay, that's a whole other thing, and I'm going to get in trouble for talking about Hawaii. But I mean, how come Hawaii got to be a state and not Puerto Rico?
Yeah, well, that's a very good
Oh,
question.
that's a
So,
bad question to ask, isn't it?
well, no, well, we had a lot of strategic salience placed on Hawaii. I mean, it wasn't just what we could get from the agricultural community out there. It was
Oh,
also
war.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it was a territory for the longest time. And I think because, if you think about it, Hawaii really is the crossroads of the Pacific because,
Hmm.
that was generally the way station for any of your trans-Pacific flights, any of your trans-Pacific shipments. It was where you could project any naval or extended land power onto Asia proper. Hawaii would be a way station, or Hawaii would even be a staging area to an extent. And I think just because of its strategic value, its strategic location, and the fact that it was a crossroads for trans-Pacific trade, I think that's what lent it to getting the big population that it did. And then, of course, after World War II, the salience of it was even
Yeah.
more blatant to us because this was American soil that had been attacked. And I really think that after VJ Day, it was really only going to be a matter of time before Hawaii itself did become a state. Um, you know, and yeah, I say that for a number of reasons. I know that after the war, there was a big surge of economic dollars pumped into what was then the territory, and Alaska was pretty much on the same trajectory, and I think in
Hmm.
no small part also accelerated because of the Cold War, because you have Alaska and then the Bering Strait. It's only a stone's throw away from the former Soviet Union. Uh, so you take all those things combined, it was, I think, the foregone conclusion that Alaska and Hawaii were going to become states. But if you take a look at Puerto Rico, well, yeah, that was a territory that was granted to us after the Spanish-American War. Uh, Certainly no place that we have an issue with, but just didn't offer the, I guess, the strategic dividends that some place like Alaska or Hawaii did. I mean, there was less, I think, to gain, just not only economically, but strategically. There just wasn't that big of
Hmm.
a drive to make Puerto Rico a state in the
So
same way
it
that
goes
Hawaii.
about, security.
Yeah,
So, okay.
because,
Because
I
Guam,
think,
there's Guam, American Samoa, but that was like
right,
one war or, maybe
yeah,
others too, but
yeah.
not
And
like a ongoing thing.
right, and I guess you could probably say the same thing about the U.S. Virgin Islands, and which in retrospect I think is almost counterintuitive because after Castro came to power in Cuba, and granted Cuba is only 90 miles off the coast of Florida. I would have thought that
Mm.
after Cuba, and especially even more so after Grenada, and after the communist uprisings throughout Latin America and in the Caribbean, that there would have been a greater push to make the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico states,
Yeah.
to accommodate that strategic position that I would have thought we wanted. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll make you president next. I like that. Well, so but this is the interesting about a flag. It's, 50 states united and Hawaii and, Alaska included, which is interesting, and even the purchase of Alaska from Russia is so fascinating to me how we have this incredible state. It's just beautiful. But, let's go to the American anthem.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's a couple of songs that are very patriotic songs, American songs, but the anthem, tell us a little history of that because I think that's the other thing. People, it gets used like, do you stand up or not? And when people don't, when they're angry at their country, they don't. I mean, John Mellencamp was famously didn't stand up. You know, in sports, people didn't raise the flag. They didn't stand up, so all kinds of pop culture parts of life, right?
Mhm.
The flag and the anthem. Um, it's interesting and it's a way to show, hey, change needs, it is a way to show change, right? Of, hey, I'm just disliking what's going on. Um, and that we're not as united as maybe we think, right? When someone does that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's
It's rough.
it's provoked a lot of controversy, and this is one that I tend to take very seriously. Now, for those who have taken offense to the Confederate flag, I do see where they're coming from, and I am sympathetic to it, just based on the study of history. But turning your back or kneeling during the national anthem, that's something that I take issue with. And, I say that because, look, if there are things that you are dissatisfied with and things that you want to protest, there are ways that you can do that. You can protest the specific actions of a group of people or a section of the government or even the government itself and the people who are in charge at that time. But there's still a level of reverence that you need to have for the country itself because the national identity and the national psyche and what America stands for is far beyond whatever politics are happening at that particular intersection of space and time. Because, a big issue that can be ongoing and can be, a very critical matter at one point in time, it can be resolved. And then 20 years later, everybody looks back on it and says, okay, well, that was a problem then, but I'm glad it's not a problem now. But, you can look back at how you conducted yourself over the course of that problem and say, well, hey, I still maintained an air of dignity. I still was a patriotic American, despite the fact that some of the people in power or a certain segment of society was not acting with good intentions, or they
Yeah.
didn't, or they had malicious intent. Because I think of the civil rights movement of the 1960s, and one of the things that stands out to me, for better or for worse, I think back to the 1968 Olympics. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to George Foreman when he was boxing in the Olympics. Yeah, this was the 1960s. This was critical mass for the civil rights movement in America. And yet George Foreman, who, had a checkered past, I mean, he came from rough and tumble upbringing, had a criminal record before he became an evangelist. But
Mm.
George Foreman, even at the height of the civil rights movement in America, displayed himself as a proud American, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and he was waving the flag, and you could see the pride in his face. And I also think now the example that I'm going to give has not aged well, just as a matter of context, but at the time it was very poignant. Before Cassius Clay became Muhammad Ali. 1960 Olympics, he was the gold medal winner for boxing in the light heavyweight division.
Mm-hmm.
And this is 1960, of course, just as the civil rights movement was really getting underway. He said in there was a press conference, it was a meet and greet with Nikita Khrushchev, of all people. And he went on the record to say, in my opinion, the USA is the best country in the world, including yours.
Mm.
And I'm thinking, okay, well, he's basically just throwing down the gauntlet in front of the leader of the communist world, saying, "Hey, despite the problems that I'm well aware of back home, I still think America is the number one country in the world." And when he was asked, I can't remember if this was the same press conference or if it was another one. There was a reporter who asked him what his thoughts were about the ongoing issue of segregation, and Cassius Clay in what I think was a moment of lucidity, I think, said, "Hey, we have very highly qualified people who are working on that problem right now."
Mm.
Yeah.
So,
So it can be there is a bit of political controversy, but you take those examples, right? And they're people who are able to keep themselves dignified despite the fact that
well, I look at you as being as a army veteran, right?
yeah,
And you can have a change of what's going on in your country and be pissed all you want. You
right,
pissed off at it, right? Pissed off at the leadership, pissed off at what's going on, but you're still fighting, right? So with that, not patriotism was part of our conversation today. So
right,
this is what we're talking about, like being a patriot. So now being a patriot is now become a political statement. You're not a patriot if you don't like so and so or something.
yeah,
And I think like Nancy and I are patriots of this country because we document parks and public lands because we want to make sure that they're out there for families and kids and for green spaces to be healthy for our country.
hmm
That's part of patriotism, isn't it? If you
right,
care for your country, you do for your country. There's, just even doing shows like this, it's part of that. Um, I don't believe patriotism should be part of, I mean, politics is kind of patriotism in that, I don't know now, because now it just seems off the hook crazy.
hmm
But, patriotism to me is you care about your country, you love it, you'll do what you can to sustain it. It's community. It's a nationwide community. And the minute you drop your flag, you drop your anthem, then you're saying, screw you.
yeah,
Then if you do that, then move. You know, um, we can say things are really bad and really go and protest and really go against a specific thing, but you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Is that what I'm hearing from you on that? Don't
right,
throw it all out.
hmm
because then you might as well leave. Then you need to leave. Like if you disown your country that way, isn't that it or no? I mean, I don't, now people are going to tell me I'm this and that politically, but I'm just trying to grasp on that because patriotism to me is about loving and caring and being part of community is so the word patriot has been used in the Revolutionary War and also part of when we got here, right? That word. I mean, obviously it came from, earlier years, but being a patriot wasn't that part of history of going against the British in a way? Like we were a patriot at that time, you know? I
Yeah.
don't know.
It, we did consider ourselves to be loyal British subjects, I think, for the most part. But what disrupted that relationship for us was, yeah, really, from the outset, our whole relationship with the mother country was a lot different from what other colonies had with their own parent country. And, it's best summarized by that quip and that ubiquitous term that I'm sure we heard a lot of throughout school and a lot of our early American history classes when we talk about salutary neglect.
Mm,
We were allowed to run our own affairs. We were allowed to more or less be the masters of our own destiny. We could, conduct free trade. We were given such a wide berth of autonomy. And, the only thing that was really required of us was just to remember at the end of the day that we're still British. Well, after the French and Indian War, it became so much harder for any of the colonists to maintain their loyalty to the mother country in light of the repressive policies that were being put out of Parliament. And
mm,
it was, okay, well, we're going to, after years of not paying any taxes at all, being, free to run your own affairs and do everything as you see fit, we're going to start putting shackles on you. We're going to tax you for this. We're going to tax you for that. We're
mm.
going to restrict any number of freedoms. We're going to make you house British troops if there is no room in any of the existing barracks. Well, the problem with this, again, in the context of the time, is that the typical rank and file Brit soldier was a conscript who was sent to the Americas, not necessarily of his own free will. And typically these conscripts were guys who had gone before a magistrate for crimes including murder, rape, arson. And the judge gave them a choice. They said, okay, well, you can go to the gallows or you can join the British Army and go off, go off to the frontiers of North America. And, if the French don't get you, then the Indians will.
Wow.
So yeah, so these aren't typically the type of soldiers I certainly would not want on my property or, living in a room in my house, you know.
No, no. But so when it comes to when we're talking about patriotism, you fight for what you truly believe in, right?
Yeah.
Can, I mean, we look at today, we talk about the anthem, the American flag, standing up for the anthem. This is a sign of trying to be unity, right? So this is where you go like, hey, I don't like it when I mean, as a military man, I mean, going out there for our country, serving our country, for the military, I was thinking about that when we've seen these, episodes of people with the flag, I mean, I feel this way about banning of books too, man.
Yeah.
We should stop that crap too,
Yeah.
really. It's all sides. So I always have to say this on these shows. Nancy and I are not like politically partied, you know. We're very independent on things because we like to look at issues. That's just who we are.
Mhm.
So we're not left, we're not right, we're a little bit of everything, because it goes according to issue. I think books should be published, period. I do think if you're going to live in this country, you have some kind of commitment to the country and unity and put something into this country as a citizen, as, anybody living here. And I also believe that of visitors. You don't just come into our country and, you know, have a good time and not give something back in. And I feel that way as we travel the world and as we go anywhere, you are in a temporary community. You're part of it, so you should behave as such. So that's just my own personal beliefs. But when it comes to your right now in this country, as we start doing all these things, we start to lose history. We've got to kind of get together a bit, maybe, and I think as a soldier, if you're out even in training and boot camp and someone's putting down the flag or the anthem, does that kind of like make you go like, dude, you have no clue what we're doing for you right now? Like, how would that feel for a soldier, male or female out there in boot camp, out in the field, out at war? How would that feel? National Guard, anybody when that happens?
Well, it it's definitely something that would give any service member reason to pause
Yeah.
and yeah, just kind of I won't say it wouldn't put them on the verge of an existential meltdown, but would just give them a lot of reasons to a lot of reasons to question why they're there and do a gut check and say, hey, is this really worth it? Is this really what I want to do?
Mm. In this day and age, with the way the world's going, I think we've got to kind of grow up. Do you think? I'm just saying, I didn't want to go political, but I'm just saying we've got to kind of grow up here. The world is a little bit on fire, and you know, hopefully we can learn about unity.
Hmm.
Hopefully we can learn that. And at the end of the day, isn't that part of what the military does?
Yeah.
Is try to create, unity, um, and create peace. And I think that's the other thing that people don't understand is, I mean, if you look at what's going on in the world right now, if you think that we could have no military in this country, um, that's insane. Um, I mean, you can't not have military or someone who defends you and defends and helps and supports that way. And that's kind of it's altruistic. It'd be great that there were no wars, right? Wouldn't it be lovely if people weren't fighting and doing all this? But that's not the case. And then when people go out there and say, okay, I'm going to go out there and risk my life in defense, we should really honor that. And it's more than words for that. There's more than words. And that's kind of the thing I think when we look at 4th of July week right now, look
Hmm.
at the history of our flag, look at the history of the anthem coming about, you know? It's a beautiful song and it's hard to sing. What, who's your favorite person to sing, like sing the anthem?
You know, the the best national anthem performance that I ever saw was right before the 1991 Super Bowl, and this was when we had troops in the Gulf right ahead of Operation Desert Storm. So there was a very high intense patriotic feeling among all the
Mm.
viewers, especially in the stadium. And they had an F-15 flyby happen
Oh,
with the national anthem. But I remember it was Whitney Houston who sang that
oh,
national anthem. Yeah, Whitney Houston sang it right before the 1991 Super Bowl, and just the everything from the way she sang it to the energy of the crowd to what the commentators were saying, and hey, this is great because we have troops who are are about to go to war in the Gulf. To the F-15 flyover. It's just like when you take all that together, just the whole ambiance of that was like, man, it's like that was the perfect rendition and the perfect setup and the perfect stage and ambiance and feng shui to have the national anthem sung.
mm. It makes you cry. I mean, it brings tears. The right, the right, and that's what I'm saying. If the national anthem brings you to tears
Hmm.
when someone performs it, it's it's telling you something. It's not just the
Yeah.
song. It is about the community of our country. That's the thing. And I mean, and then there's Jimi Hendrix and Woodstock, right? Who said, I'm going to do it this way, but he's appealing to a different generation at that time, right? So that's also something to look at. Jack White, did you see Jack White perform it? It was pretty good. He did a different version, but there's something. Whitney Houston is like the perfect. I think you're 100%. She's like the perfect person. That voice, and I miss her. Every time I hear her music, I'm like, I grew up with her, in music, listening to her, not with her, But I always thought she had one of the most incredible voices of humanity ever. And what a waste! Like, so sad to see her go. It's just like, gosh, it's not a waste because we all get to hear her, but like, it's tragic is my word, tragic to see her go. But man, you're so right about her voice for that, for that performance. Hmm. Something to think about, right? As a community. What do you think about the community, looking at America as a community instead of red, white, and blue splattered across the country as we all divide up? What do you think of looking at it as a community?
Well, I think as a community, it still works. As a
Mm-hmm.
community, it's still highly functional, and we still, at the end of the day, have many of the same goals.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, I think taken as a whole, Americans, no matter what side of the aisle they fall on, I think we all agree on what the goals for America should be, but the difference
Mm.
is how we reach those goals.
Yeah.
We're united by a lot more things than divide us, and not that it's kind of odd and a little awkward that I'm going to say this. Not that I would necessarily take a lot of advice from the Clinton political family, but there is one thing that stands out that Bill Clinton said that has stuck with me ever since. He said, "There is nothing that is wrong with America that can't be fixed by what is right with America."
Mm.
And
I agree.
now, of course,
Who
uh,
wrote that? But
exactly. I mean, it
but
it
it's
was
good.
brilliant. It was brilliant, and it was well said. But the minute I heard that, I was like, "Hey, that's brilliant." But then I was also flippantly thinking to myself, "Wow, I wonder if Vince Foster feels the same way."
It's but that's the thing. That's a really true. I mean, the point is that we can argue things,
Yeah.
and the point is to maybe not lose your family over arguing it. That's
Hmm.
the point. I have a friend and I bring this up on shows all the time. And she said on the last election, she says, listen, don't lose your best friend and your family over two old men you don't even know. And I thought, you know what? It's pretty true,
That's right.
and I'm going to say it again. I'm bringing that up. Don't lose your friends and family over it. You can argue and disagree, but I think, I met Nancy and I, as we pet sat the country, we sat for a military family, pet sat for a military family, high ranking
Mhm.
general. And we sat and had these great discussions. And he just said, all of us want a healthy environment. All of us want fresh and clean air and healthy, clean water for us and our family and our kids. All of us want the same things. Just like you said, we are just all coming at it at different ways. But none of us want dirty water.
Right.
None of us want the endangered species to be gone, unless you're a psychopath, none of us want that. But none of us want homeless people. None of us want that to happen to those people. We don't want any of that. We don't want drug abuse and we don't want any of that to happen to people, but it does. And so it's really true. So when we look at 4th of July, it's Independence Day. We're free. We got rid of the tea, but we still have tea now, but and we're still taxed on it, by the way.
Yeah.
But it's just not the way it was. Maybe we can have these discussions in a better way when we get together as families. What do you think? What are you going to do for 4th of July? Are you going to have a barbecue? What do you do for a Fourth of July barbecue? Do you like to barbecue?
Well, yes, I do. But let's see. I think the biggest thing on my bucket list for the 4th of July is going to be to watch the local fireworks. Because that's
All right.
yeah, that for me is
Yeah.
always the most fun. Yeah, I love seeing the fireworks display, and just to me it's just a very vibrant way to celebrate the birth of our nation.
Mm. Right on. Well, everyone, keep up with Mike at MikeGuardia.com. His latest book is Fire in the Hole. See, he likes fireworks. Fire in the Hole, Tales of Combat with the 1st Engineer Battalion in Vietnam. It's available now on Amazon, all those great places. Shop.org. What is it? Bookshop.org. What is that? I forgot what their name is. Yeah, bookshop.org. Check them out. But everyone keep up with him again, MikeGuardia.com, but also he's on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Keep up with his YouTube channel, man. Man, you put up some crazy stuff up there, man. Seriously. Like all kinds of combat stuff. Like, yeah, if you're into real military stuff, you need to go follow him on YouTube. Thank you so much, Mike, and happy 4th of July and summer to you and your family.
Thank you, Lisa. Always a pleasure to be on the show.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio's Military Monday show featuring Mike Guardia, award-winning author and historian. Keep up with Mike and his books at MikeGuardia.com. Follow us at BigBlendRadio.com.